So, fairly early in 2004, evidence began to emerge and reports began to be published by, for instance, reporters like Seymour Hersh at the New York Times, or Post rather, about the abuses at Abu Ghraib. And this spurred reporters on, and they started investigating and filing Freedom of Information Acts, and discovered some 1,300 pictures of acts of abuse for detainees, including pornographic acts, pictures of detainees who were dead, possibly as a result of the interrogation activities at the prison. There were video files, memos, and the first response that emerged from the administration in the United States was that this was the bad and ill-conceived actions of a few isolated individuals. But as time went on, it became clear that this was in fact part of a policy that had been developed, sanctioned, and implemented from the very highest levels of the United States government. And so a number of techniques emerged that were used across a wide variety of facilities on literally thousands of people at some point. The first technique was hooding. Now, hooding is used to prevent people from seeing and to disorient them. It also prevents them from breathing freely sometimes. One bag, sometimes two bags and an elastic blindfold is put over a prisoner's head. Now, when the blindfold slips down or the bags get too bunched up, this further impedes their proper breathing. Hooding is sometimes used in conjunction with beatings to increase the anxiety, because a hooded person doesn't know when the next blows will come or from where, and this makes them very anxious. The practice of hooding also allows interrogators to remain anonymous and thus to act with impunity and without the inhibition of having to look the people they're beating in the eyes. Hooding is practiced during this period could last for periods of a few hours or up to 2 to 4 consecutive days. Another technique that was used fairly generally was handcuffing prisoners using flexi-cuffs. And these flexi-cuffs were sometimes so tight and used for such extended periods of time that they caused skin lacerations and long-term after effects on the hands and legs, including things like nerve damage and loss of mobility. And these effects were actually observed by the International Red Cross when they visited some of these places. Another technique that was used was beating with hard objects, including pistols and rifles, slapping, punching, kicking with the knees of the feet, slamming people against walls. And this would occur in various parts of the body, the legs, the side, the lower back, or the groin. Prisoners were paraded naked outside their cells in front of other persons who were deprived of their liberty as well, in front of guards. Sometimes the prisoners would be hooded. Sometimes prisoners were forced to wear women's underwear over their heads. Prisoners were placed in stress positions, either restrained or forced to hold those stress positions themselves. In many cases, they would attach people repeatedly over several days with handcuffs to the bars of their cell in humiliating, naked or underwear positions, and in uncomfortable positions that cause physical pain. And this included confining people in boxes so small that they couldn't really move around for days at a time. Another technique was prolonged exposure to excessive heat or cold. For example, while hooded, some prisoners were given prolonged exposure to the sun over a period of several hours during the hottest part of the day, when temperatures in Iraq could reach over 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Prisoners were sometimes exposed to prolonged periods of excessively loud noise or to periods of complete sensory deprivation. And either deliberately or as an effect of the other techniques, prisoners experienced prolonged periods of sleep deprivation, lasting in some cases up to a week. And in at least one case, a wounded person was denied pain medication. Now, a couple of reporters got the CIA to acknowledge specifically the sorts of enhanced interrogation techniques that they employed during this period. And those techniques include the following: the attention grab, where the interrogator forcefully grabs the shirt front of the prisoner and shakes them. The attention slap, an open-handed slap aimed at causing pain and triggering fear. The belly slap, a hard, open-handed slap to the stomach. The aim of this is to cause pain, but not internal injuries. And in fact, doctors are consulted and advised against using a punch, which could cause lasting internal damage. Another technique that was employed by the CIA was called long time standing. And this technique is described as among the most effective by the reporters. Prisoners are forced to stand handcuffed with their feet shackled to an eye bolt in the floor for more than 40 hours. Exhaustion and sleep deprivation, it's thought, are effective in yielding confessions. And in fact, oftentimes, these people who were shackled there had their ankles swell to twice their normal size and started to experience kidney failure before they were released from the position. The cold cell was another technique where prisoners were left to stand naked in a cell kept at near 50 degrees. Throughout their time in the cell, the prisoner was doused with cold water periodically. And finally, the most famous or infamous of the techniques was waterboarding. Here, a prisoner is bound to an inclined board. Feet are raised and head is slightly below the feet. Cellophane is wrapped over the prisoner's face and water is poured over him or her. Unavoidably, in these circumstances, the gag reflex kicks in, and a terrifying fear of drowning leads to almost instant pleas to bring the treatment to a halt. In two cases in particular, we know of the details of the waterboarding and other interrogation techniques. In the case of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was one of the planners of 9/11, interrogators waterboarded him 183 times. They waterboarded him so often some days that doctors were concerned that his electrolytes were so depleted that he would actually die. And what they recommended to the interrogators was that they waterboard him using salt water so that they wouldn't further deplete his electrolytes. His belly became distended from all the water, and when you pushed at his belly, he would spontaneously and uncontrollably release liquid. Another case that we know a fair amount about is Abu Zabaya. He was a Saudi, and according to Ross and Esposito for ABC News, he got the full quote-unquote CIA treatment. He was stripped, he was deprived of sleep, he was kept in a Kaftan-sized box for days on end, and waterboarded at least 83 times.